So first of all, good morning, everyone, or I suppose maybe it might be the afternoon for some of you. And thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be giving a talk. So I'm talking about teaching dyslexic students within your classes. And so basically we're going to be going through a series that I've just been working on, which is dyslexic friendly. So we'll be looking at lots of different things that are included in the series that either obviously you can use yourself or with this series. So hopefully it'll be useful for you. And please, any questions throughout the talk will be greatly welcome. So first of all, who am I? Okay, so my name is Laura Broadbent. So I'm the main editor for this series that I'm going to be talking about. It's called the Bloggers series. Prior to becoming a materials writer, I was an English teacher for nearly 10 years. So I was teaching, first of all, in Malaysia, France, Italy, Brazil, Spain, and the UK. And then while I was in Spain, I started becoming a materials writer, first by translating textbooks. And then they ran out of things to translate, so I had to start writing them from scratch. So from then, I've become a materials writer for various different things, as was mentioned kindly in the introduction. So primary to adult materials, Cambridge exams, UK national GCSE exams, videos, podcasts, and online games. As you know, all of these are particularly key right now. So they're the kind of things I've been writing for various different publishers. And probably about 5 years ago, I started specializing in materials for dyslexic students. This all started because my husband, he's from Brazil, so went through school without any signs of anything. But then I started realizing that even in his native language, he would mix up the months or the days of the week and wouldn't know the order. So for example, he'd often say, what comes after September? November, and not realize it was October. And for example, the same with days of the week. So it would be, what days after Wednesday? Wouldn't be able to know it was Thursday unless he said Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So this first struck me as a sign that that's probably not, it doesn't happen all the time, particularly in your first language. You might expect this in second languages, but not in first language. So in the end, we decided to get him to do a dyslexic test in England, partly just because we were living in England at the time. Turned out he was very dyslexic. So therefore, it was interesting because he'd been going to English classes and he'd come back and, bearing in mind, he's an adult, almost in tears. I can't understand anything. I feel really stupid. I don't know what I need to do for my homework. I'm not learning anything. I don't want to go back. And so it was very interesting when then he got a dyslexic teacher and was using dyslexic materials, and suddenly, I will never forget, after his first class with a specialized dyslexic teacher using the methods I'm going to talk about today, he kind of put his hands up and said, I can learn. And he started crying. So this, for me, was the beginning of helping people, not only with dyslexia, with various different learning abilities. You will always have different learning abilities in your classes, as you well know. The absolutely positive effect of having lots of different techniques used within the classroom, and the fact that it just opens the door to something that many students have not been able to access before. There are a growing number of dyslexic materials out there, but obviously as teachers, you're not really taught how to teach lots of different learning abilities. So this is hopefully going to be really useful for you. So therefore, we're going to look through today. We're going to be looking at the Bloggers, as I say, the Bloggers series. So why is it unique and why is it useful? Topic and project-based approaches that incorporate 21st century skills. There's a lot of pressure on teachers these days to incorporate 21st century skills, on top of having your students go through their exams and get all the levels that they need to do. So there's a lot of pressure on teachers in schools these days to tick all of these boxes. And then we'll go through dyslexic friendly tasks, which are task types, presentation, wording, and phonetics, things that you can do. Yeah. I'm not sure if that was a question or something. I'm not sure. If it is something in the chat, please just drop it in. And then we'll talk about how you can do create sustainable results in your class. Okay, so just to kick off with the series first that I'm going to base things on today, all of the examples will be examples that you can use yourself and create resources and techniques yourself, and these are just examples of how we've done this in a course ready-made for you. So first of all, the bloggers series that we've been working on, let me just make this slightly bigger, is a series of 4 different books, obviously going from 1 to 4. And there are 4 student books, 4 workbooks, 4 teachers books, and the digital options. They're based at teenagers, so going from 11 to 15 years old, and they're aimed at state and private schools and mixed ability classes. This is really key because not only is it mixed ability, it's mixed learning types. Okay, so that's what we're really going to be looking at today. It's very international. It starts from A1 and then obviously goes up. So you've got starting out, taking off, moving up, and flying high. And I will be showing you how all of the teaching, you can teach it off the page to create an inclusive environment. Lots of multimedia things going on. And as I mentioned before, project-based and 21st century. So let's just have a look first at what makes it the way it's set out for you. So your student book will have 8 different units. Each unit is taught by a teenager or presented by a teenager. So the idea is obviously you have a teenager teaching or sharing with the teenagers in your class so that they can relate and they're talking about the same things and they're thinking about the same things and they're going through the same experiences. This can often be quite difficult, of course, when you're teaching teenagers and they see you as someone who is older and not interested in the same things. So this really, really helps to relate them. So in your student book in each unit, so let's say, for example, here we've got the pink unit here, which is unit 7. So you've got the presenter who will be presented on the opening page and they will open with a video. Every single unit has a video. And this is partly where our multimedia is coming in. I know lots of you will be using videos in your classes or lots of you won't be using for various different reasons, whether your internet's unreliable, don't have the resources, which is very common, or just don't have the time because you've got to get through the things in your course book. So here you've got the introduction to the unit, which is either by video or by audio, where the students in your class will get to know a bit of the life, an aspect of the life of your presenting teenager. So it may be food, teenagers are really into food, it may be their family, it may be whatever is going to be coming up, that will be presented in the unit. And then we'll be going through different aspects. Ooh, let me just move this box, sorry, so I can, there we go. Okay, so then in each unit, you've got 2 separate lessons. Each lesson will present different vocabulary and different grammar. So you've got one and then the other. And then at the end of the unit, as we come over to the right of the side here, we've got grammar and vocabulary all surmised from the unit will be put into diagrams, which I will go through and show you properly in a second. And then the key part of this book is the culture blog. So there's a culture blog, which is basically sharing, and the key is sharing here, one aspect of the teenager's life that they're interested in, obviously with the teenagers of your class. And then they'll be going on to the unit challenge, which is a cooperative challenge or collaborative challenge for the students to do all together, which is creating, bringing together all of the vocabulary and grammar and the skills from the unit and bringing it all together in a challenge or a project. And at the end of the book, then we've got the grammar exercises, which you'd hope for, lots of different types of reading, and then we've got long-term projects. So they're generally term-long projects or year-long projects, completely adaptable for you as a teacher to set them up as you would like. And then finally, we've got the learning strategies, which again, I will go into more detail. And then in your workbook, you've got the unit by unit, so it works coincide, literally goes alongside, and it lots of practice. But on top of that, it's got reflection pages and phonetics, pronunciation, which I will go into more detail because it's really, really good for lots of different learning types. And then lots of different memorizing techniques for your students, which again will help with lots of different learning techniques. So I'm just going to pass through this because as it's going to come up in all the next bits. So 21st century skills, a lot of you will be very, very familiar with these. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, and cultural knowledge. So as we go through all the different aspects today, I'm going to show how to do that through this course book with also techniques that you can use generally in your class that will help you just tick all of the boxes for these 21st century skills and create an inclusive environment at the same time, which is a big ask for teachers. Okay. So as we begin, so for example, here where you can see the first page of the first lessons. As I said, each unit is divided into 2 lessons. This is the first lesson of a unit. So here, as you can see, it's about school uniforms. And then obviously the unit will be talking about clothes. So first of all, activating prior knowledge. So asking your students, they will be looking at watching Sheena's video. And then comparing Sheena's video with the things that she discusses about the school uniform in her school with your students. Maybe your students don't have school uniform. Maybe they do. What do they like? What don't they like? So they will be watching the video, they will be listening to the video, and they will be personally reacting to the video. When you personally react to something, this straight away comes into your longer term memory because it's an emotive effect on your students, and that's what they will remember. That's when they come into break at school, they'll be like, what do you think about school uniform? They will discuss this. As soon as they discuss it, all of these things will be going into their long-term memory, which is the key thing for lots of different learning types. As you can see on the in the middle here in the Let's Play section. So this is again taking the language that the students will have used and the grammar that the students will have used and playing in pairs. That's really key, and I know you'll probably be aware of this, that working in pairs is very, very key for lots of different learning types as long as they move around the pairs, because there's a lot less pressure. It also gives students time to learn about each other. So you'll often find that students naturally group into their best friends in class, and they can often not really mix with the other group. So by having mixed pairs can often work really well to have them working together. Also, whilst playing, it encourages the students to use lots of different skills. So let's say, for example, here, describing and guessing. By describing, they're using speaking skills. Some students will be stronger at speaking than writing, and therefore this is their opportunity to use their imagination and speaking skills to work with the vocabulary with the partner. What is very common with lots of different learning types, so including dyslexia, is that because their long-term memory is very, very good, they're able to create links with knowledge that they already have. That often people who don't have dyslexia, like me, for example, I often won't make. So when teaching dyslexic students, you're often surprised that you'll be talking about one thing and they'll connect it with something that's in a different class, that's in a completely different aspect of their life, because their long-term memory is able to pick it up from there and bring it in. So this is a really key skill that's really helpful to use for help with all of the students in your class. So therefore, playing these games is really, really key. As you can see, we've got a mini challenge here. So these mini challenges are building up, so there's stepping stones to reach the main challenge. So one, they start creating confidence because it's almost the bite size. It's the speaker previous to me was saying, everything in bite size is really, really key. It's manageable. It creates achievable goals for your students. And once they've got this mini challenge, then they'll feel much more confident and prepared to go on to the next one and bigger, which are really, really key life skills. Okay, so I'm just popping next one here. Okay, so this is the lesson 2 of the same unit. So as you can see, they're going shopping because they were talking about clothes. So we've got a map here. So we're using visual skills for the students to latch onto. So they've got audio from the video, they've got visual from the video, they've got visual from the page. This is all going in together. And we've got a voting here in activity 2, vote for the best present Sheena can buy. So by voting, you're instilling the critical thinking skills for your students. Why, for example, is the t-shirt better than the scarf? And explaining why. And even this action of explaining why is a really key skill for your students to be able to learn to justify their reasons in future, whether it be life, whether it be family, whether it be social life. These are really key skills to think and justify carefully. Excuse me. Group work, again, it's the collaborative 21st century skill. Respecting each other, listening to each other, and coming to group conclusions is a really, really key skill for your students. Okay, so therefore, and as you can see here, we've got another mini challenge. So again, that's the second stepping stone. So here you can see there's role play. So now we're bringing drama in and imagination. So again, these are other skills that your students are bringing in. So they've obviously got the speaking, they've got the listening, so they've got the receptive skills coming in, productive, sorry, speaking, and then writing, and then also producing it in a different way, as for example here, role play. So this is also teaching them to interact with each other. And when you role play, you're probably aware that it teaches your students to put them in the shoes of somebody else. By doing this, you're creating empathy, you're creating understanding with your students, which is really key, not only to have a creative and inclusive classroom environment. These are really important abilities to have when going into work and when going into other situations. As we know, you will also always come across people you disagree with. So the ability to explain why and to understand where the other person is coming from is really, really going to be a positive skill for your students. Okay, so topic-based approaches. So this is just an example of one of the books we've got. I've just got 6 here, there are 8 in there. So first of all, we've got British habits and customs. So this of course is the benchmark to go on to customs and habits all around the world. Remarkable women. Okay, so what have women done in history? Living in Australia, so things there are to do in this country. Obviously, again, the springboard to be talking about in your country and in lots of different other countries. Diversity. Sherlock, so this is detective stories, one of my favorite things in the world. And then making a difference. So these is voluntary organizations. So by having these topics, there are things for your students to relate to really, latch onto, and that will give them a really good benchmark, or I should say springboard basis for your students to go into lots of different interesting conversations that are happening in the world and their lives at the moment. Okay, so here we've got the project-based approach. Now, the projects you can see just down the left here. So as I showed you previously, in each lesson, there's a mini challenge, and then you've got the challenge at the end of the unit. So again, it's these stepping stones going up that are working on collaboration, that are working on your students working together, working on critical thinking, because they're as groups and pairs, they will be coming together and creating something and making decisions, and they will be presenting this in various different ways. Each challenge has a different way to present your information, which is really key. By having projects, your students take pride in their projects. You'll often find that, you know, even if it's a project for a class, or if it's a project for a week, or if it's a project for 3 months, or if it's a project for a year, having this something that's going on and on and on will have your students really caring about their work, particularly if they know it's going to be presented. So for example, if we put work on the walls, it really gives your students pride. And this again is really useful for lots of different learning abilities. For example, my mum was telling me the other day that when she was in primary school, so I think she was about 8 years old, and she said to me she still remembers the day that her teacher put her work on the wall because her handwriting had been particularly good in that piece of work. And she still remembers now how proud she felt about that. And I won't tell you how old she is, but she's certainly gone past a few decades, and that has stayed in her mind. So it just goes to show how important that creating projects together and then putting those projects on the wall or somewhere else if you're able to. I know there's lots of times these days that you put things online, and you might have a school intranet or something that things go online and parents and students look at, and this pride really instills in your students, creates confidence for them. So these projects and topics all work towards that. Okay, so as I said, the projects in one unit, this is just to show you them all together. The challenge is set out at the beginning of the unit so the students know where they're going and why. So they know that the mini challenge here in 2 and the mini challenge here in 3 are all working towards the main challenge at the end. So by creating the direction and focus for your students, they know why they're doing something. A lot of the hardest thing to particularly engage teenagers is that they're like, why am I doing this? What's the point? I'm not interested. So by having the challenge set at the beginning, they know why they're doing it. And this will help focus them and lead them towards success at the end of the unit and the 2 lessons. Okay, and this is just an example of one of the long projects, so English project with food. So this is creating a cross-curricular approach where obviously your students will not only be learning about English, they will be learning about biology and the digestive system in the body. So by obviously teaching, this is quite a popular approach these days, that by learning one of your main school subjects in a different language, the students, it becomes a subconscious thing. And then they're able to do this in, well, at least 2 languages. It could be more because there are obviously students who will be doing this in various different languages. Again, it's having the long-term projects which are ticking the boxes for the 21st century skills. Okay, so as I said, project-based learning, similar to the real world. As you saw, the digestive system, food, we eat food every day. Food, having the right nutrition is very important to your daily life. So this is obviously related to children's day-to-day life. Building self-confidence, having the mini projects, working towards the big project and having the pride that students have. Building relationships between students because they're working together collaboratively, building relationships with teachers because not only are teachers helping students throughout, so they are their go-to person to be helping them by obviously, putting work on the wall. The students know that they are valued by the teacher. Perseverance. Things, particularly language learning, does not happen in one day, and projects do not happen in one day. That's why they're set for slightly longer terms. So this creates perseverance, displaying work, winning for the teacher because they get to show the students really work. There's a bond between students and teachers, and then the students themselves feel proud. Reflection, so it allows you to look back. Okay, so how would I have done this differently if? You can practice your conditional sentences in English there as well. And it's also an ability, an opportunity to evaluate your students. So if you've got different language learning types, there will be some students that don't perform so well in exams. They might perform better in coursework or project work. So to create an equal balance, an opportunity for students to be able to express and show their abilities, by having the project-based learning, teachers are able to evaluate students in a different way, and this will work for some, so it creates a much more equal situation for students to be evaluated. Task types. So with lots of, and this is by no means all, so obviously dyslexia, as with any human, we are all different. Symptoms are different, signals are different, ways of dealing with it are different, okay? But by doing lots of these different tasks, it helps you kind of connect with lots of different students in your class. So for example, when asking your students to produce work in English, task types that we've included in this series that you can just do, make as a teacher. I forget what this is called, this yellow thing, this piece of paper on the left, you know, where you have students make it and they open the flaps and they put things inside. It's very, very popular game, particularly for teenagers and young kids to do, and it's a perfect way to learn and practice vocabulary and get it into the long-term memory. So you'll find that lots of students, if their strength is not in writing, their strength might be in things like this. Not only playing with it and repeating, because they're singing as they're doing it, they're repeating it and it goes into their long-term memory, but also just doing this piece of paper, folding it in the correct places, unfolding it in the correct places, writing the information in the correct places. This will work for the strengths of some students, which will finally give them the opportunity to show and practice their strengths. Another really useful task, as you can see, the blue net here, this is obviously to make a cube. So for example, if you say to a student, okay, go and read this text or watch this video and write down 6 different things, pieces of information. And so for, you know, you could say to some students, write it as a list. You could say to other students, present this information on a cube, and then they can either make the cube net themselves, or you give them the template of the cube, and then they can put it together and then write the information on it first and then put it together. Again, this will work to strengths of lots of students types and learning types. For example, particularly generally dyslexic students work really well with these kind of patterns and sequences. So you can either have students writing lists or presenting it on a cube. Exactly the same production of language, but purely in a different way, which will work for some different brains. And here we've got a Venn diagram. So the 2 ovals here that overlap. This is a really good way, again, for either presenting information and also for having your students compare. So for example, this one is the students are watching a video about 2 ladies and what they've been able to do in their lives. So we've got Catherine and Oprah, which you might know. And so students will be writing the information that does in the oval that doesn't overlap, the information that is specific to each person. And then the information that both of the women share comes down in the middle. So not only are your students, again, producing information in a different way. Again, you can have lists, you can have students writing it in a paragraph, or you can have students presenting the information in a Venn diagram. Again, this for lots of different learning types will work much easier for their brains. You'll also be allowing students to compare very easily, a really good way to then have them produce comparative sentences in English. So these are just task types that are really good to create an inclusive environment for lots of different students. For example, when my husband did things, put information into a Venn diagram, done. If you asked him to write it in a list, couldn't do it. Just literally couldn't do it. His brain wasn't working. So it just shows you that the different brains will allow them to produce language in a different way. presentation of vocabulary and grammar. So here you've got time expressions, for example, is the grammar. So as you can see, you've got the words highlighted. The key prepositions are highlighted: on, at, in, and they're set out really, really clearly in straight lines, which really work for lots of different learning types. And then here you've got the vocabulary. So what really helps with students when learning vocabulary is to highlight the word stress. Okay, not the phonetic alphabet, because a lot of teachers don't know the phonetic alphabet. A lot of students don't know the phonetic alphabet. So by using it, you're just creating more work. Whereas if you do it by word stress, this is something that students will have to know. So for example, let's use the word here, grandmother. Okay, so the grand is highlighted here with a bold color so that students can instantly cluster the word into two parts. So it's grandmother. Now, by doing that, dyslexic students, first by dividing the word into two syllables, grandmother, you have 3 syllables, and then highlighting the stress allows the brain, because the brain can only focus on things in chunks, it allows the brain to focus on the chunk, and therefore it can process the information through the short-term memory and then store it in the long-term memory. And this therefore allows the student to remember things a lot quicker and process it. And this again is useful for all of your students, not just necessarily students with dyslexia. For example, for me, when I was learning a different language, I would always learn the syllables and the stress. All language is a type of music, and therefore you're just helping the brain divide it into different parts. So therefore, teaching and presenting new vocabulary like this, or grammar with the prepositions in bold, can be a really helpful way of the brain processing the information, and lots of different brains processing the information that they can manage. Clear presentation. So while it's really nice to have, for example, pictures in the background, and it could be really exciting for students to see, actually for lots of learning types, this is very, very difficult to absorb and process the information. So for example, when I was teaching some dyslexic students, if I would give them, let's say for example on the right here, the mini challenge, the yellow table or the chart, let's say they had that chart, but there were shapes or there were pictures behind it. Now, their brain could not just focus on the table. The brain was looking at all of the other things and could not get rid of them and focus just on the table. Therefore, it was creating an overload in the brain. So the brain is looking at the chart, is looking at the shapes, is looking at the colors, is looking at the pictures, is thinking what they mean, and it's creating a zzz effect in the brain. This stops the processing part of the brain working, and therefore the brain cannot process it and then put it into the long-term memory to store. Therefore, by removing the distractions of the background things, and maybe, for example, if the table wasn't completely in line, if it kind of went wonky, that again would create a distraction, because the brain is thinking, why is it going wonky? Is there a reason for this? And the brain gets fixated on this. So by having everything in straight lines, having everything clear, and with nothing in the background, helps the brain focus. Again, this is useful not only for dyslexic learners, but all types of learners. Okay, and again, as you can see here in the grammar, everything is in strict, straight lines. And again, bullet points are really, really good. Not only does it divide the information into chunks for the brain, it puts it into a straight line so the brain can really focus on it. So this clear presentation is really useful. Again, if you're writing on the whiteboard, just keep that in mind. Have things in lines, have things separated for the brain to be able to not be distracted by other things. Keywords in bold. So again, with the same idea, a dyslexic brain, if it's looking at a sentence, let's say, for example, let's look at this first one. Watch part 2 of Tara's video again. Now, what will often happen with a dyslexic brain, it will read the words, it will understand all of the words. There is no problem with comprehension of the words and the meanings. However, then when the words are put together in this sentence, the brain, because it works in chunks rather than in a long list, it can't understand the meaning of the sentence. Therefore, by not only obviously learning keywords for all students is really important, often a lot of very common exam skill practice is understanding the keywords in an audio or in a reading. And if students are able to identify a keyword, it then makes it a lot easier for them to understand, example, the context or the information that they are required to identify. Therefore, by highlighting the keywords, this not only trains all of your students to look for the common keywords that will always appear in exams and lots of different activity types. It will focus the brains, so the different learning brains, the dyslexic brain will focus in on the watch, and the brain will say, okay, I know I need to watch something. Done. They know what is required of them. Then they can start, learning, looking at the different, the different keywords. But by having the keywords highlighted already, one, the teacher knows which keywords to highlight for the students, but also if the students are just looking at the text and the brain's becoming overloaded because it's looking at all the words and it's becoming distracted by all of the words in the sentence, the brain is focused in on that keyword, and straight away the panic goes down, the brain calms down, and it gives it room to process the information. So this is helpful having it already on the text, but also as a teacher giving instructions. Visual presentations. So let's say, for example, when you're teaching teaching a student how to write an email or an article, should I say, sorry, this example is an article. You can see a little wheel on the bottom left here with who, what, where, when, why. Okay, so the topic is in the middle. So just by presenting this information, one in colors, two in a visual wheel diagram, will again allow some brains to access the information that had these information just been written in a list. Dyslexic brains cannot deal with long lists. However, with the different colors, it's much more easy. It's easy for it to process information. I, as a non-dyslexic student, also, when I see this wheel, I am able to remember the information much more easily myself. Color coordinated, round in a wheel, and a lot of the time when I'm revising for exams, or particularly in the past at school, I would draw these little things, write in the words, and then when I get to the exam, I have a spare piece of paper, I draw the wheel again with all the words, and there I have the information ready. I'm not relying on my brain to remember it as I'm writing. This not only creates calmness in your student when they're doing an exam, so they will be able to do the activities much more calmly, they'll just have much more confidence in themselves. And it's a key skill for life, okay? Background colors. Now, again, as I mentioned, that students, all dyslexic students are different. So this is not the case for everyone. However, what has been noticed in research is that background colors are really key for the brain to be able to take in information. So by having, generally seems that the most popular background colors for the brain to be able to process information is either yellow or blue. Of course, there are some students who prefer other colors, but as a general thing, these are the common ones. So by having key information presented with the background colors, it again draws the brain to it, allows the brain to process this key information and put it into the long-term memory. Again, also, this is really key for all students, because by having a background color, the brain, or you will automatically look at that. So it highlights key information for students. Therefore, that's why the challenges has the background information, the grammar has the background information, and reflective questions has a background information. I'm just going to skip this because I realize we don't have long at all. I will just look at pronunciation, sorry, quickly. So pronunciation, auditory, receptive skills can be very difficult for lots of students. And so by just having your students learn sounds by song is really, really useful. So for example, we've got a tongue twister here. I will try and do it. I'm actually not very good at tongue twisters, so please feel free to laugh. So I can catch cats, but cats can't catch me. Can you catch cats? Okay, there we go, done it. So by doing this, by having your students repeat songs, it will make them not only practice them in a melody, which is chunking the information straight away, and the brain again brings it in. Also, by having it in a melody, children will naturally repeat it more and more. As you know, when a song gets stuck in your head, it just goes round and round and round, and you can remember a song that you learned in primary school, for example. And again, by having the visualization here, again, it's another thing for the memory and the processing memory to connect to and allow the information to go in. So by having the information coming in visually, by hearing as well, and then producing it through sound and music, allows your students to really, really work the pronunciation without really meaning to. Again, as a teacher, makes your life really easy. So I'm just going to skip diagrams, particularly important. So by a really good way to get information into long-term memory is by having things in diagrams, as you can see in this mind map here. Again, as you can see, yellow background because it's easier to process for lots of brains. And then you've got different categorized colors for different categories of food, each with the picture, each with the word. So therefore, and then you've got the activities on the right to make this information go in and students to produce it again. So you've got lots of different ways in the information coming in. You're also teaching students how to create their own mind maps. The last activity there on the right is to create your own mind map. So you're teaching students, all students, really, really good, effective ways of getting vocabulary into their long-term memory. Sorry, I'm going to skip through because as you can see, I'm running out of time. So multimedia presentation. So here at the back of the book, this is just one example of how do I, whatever, skills. So these really help for your 21st century skills. They help your teachers. So how do I get better at memorizing? Memorizing is one of the key factors of learning, not only a language, anything. So these pages, they're different in every book. But they will give you techniques such as storyboards, mnemonics, memory places, graphic organizers such as mind maps, pair games, flashcards, fantastic, music, song and rhyme as we looked at in pronunciation, having a student record themselves, chunking, so putting words and into different sections or sentences into different sections, and learning by movement. So, you know, a student runs when they learn the word run. So all these techniques helps your students. A really good technique to remember when they're learning, for example, words is that I always used to use this, is you're in a house and you walk, you visualize your own home. You walk into each room and you imagine whatever part of, let's say they're parts of the body. Okay, so there's, no, maybe not parts of the body, different food. So I walk into my bedroom, there's a banana. I walk into the bathroom, there's an orange. So and then by remembering this, when I'm in an exam or in any other situation, I picture my house, and you'll be amazed how many students, pretty much all of them, will remember every single word when they visualize again their house. Okay, again, classifying your words by pictures. So obviously we've got sports, pitch, movement, someone running, house, a little house. And so again, this is just another example of the pages at the back that help teachers, that help students, how to improve your written work, how to prepare for and act out a scene, so drama skills. So it's all written out, reflective questions, and then a practice for students to do together. Reflection, I'm going to finish on this. So one of the key things for reflection learning, your independent learning, all learners learn differently. And so therefore it's really key for each student to know how they themselves learn. The only way this is going to happen is by reflection. Okay, so in the workbook we've got reflection, there's reflection questions with the yellow background, and this all helps the metacognitive skills of your students, and therefore they can use it in their future learning skills. So sorry, I had to go through that really fast, but there's way too much to tell you, as the previous speaker said. So I'm just going to put up the publication dates there for you and say thank you very much for listening, and all questions are welcome.